You can call me Moxie. There's a lot I want to try to explain in this video, and you'll see me expand on it a little more later, but just filming this has been difficult due to dissociation and I guess being aware of certain things I'm going to discuss. So if my speech is a little disjointed and you might see clips switching from today's filming to another day's filming, I apologize, but it is kind of reflective of what I'm going to explain in this video. So yeah, and if you see the plants here, the plants don't always stay in my room. They have to go out by the windowsill so they get sunlight, and then I bring them back in. So yeah. I do have several intertwining topics that I'd like to discuss, so hopefully I can tie them together rather coherently. So when I was younger, some people may already be aware from a previous video I made when I was dealing with depression and various other things. Something was said to me that was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's what prompted me to attempt to take my life back when I was in middle school. For clarification, it wasn't bullying or anything, it was something else. But I suppose what I learned from that experience is that words have weight. And so I believe because of that, ever since then, I've always wanted to try to be as mindful of my words as possible and think before I speak. However, because of this, there have been a few instances in which I've been told my initial quietness can be almost more unsettling than if I were to lash out or talk back right away. Let's say through family, prior relationships, etc. You've grown accustomed to going back and forth with someone and possibly saying things you don't mean. While being in that situation can be unpleasant, it's become an environment your brain is familiar with navigating. There's certain patterns to it. So to come out of that familiarity and be met with someone who wants to take a moment before they speak, it can typically go one of two ways. One, it's a little unexpected, but okay, we can communicate like this. Or two, this is unfamiliar territory to your brain, so now it can't do what it wanted to do, and it's making it a little anxious. Also, let's say, for about as long as you can remember, you've been around a rather chaotic environment or upbringing, and you had to heavily rely on yourself. You always had to make decisions, figure things out to the point where you've become hyper-independent. People like that aren't unfamiliar to me. I've met many individuals, both men and women, who are like that to varying degrees. And typically, we get along great. Now let me put a pin in this and we'll circle back to it later. So let's start with ego. What I'm about to discuss may seem to be sprung in direct opposition to the topic of ego we'll bring up later in the video, but I assure you it's not. And it's something I intended to discuss in this comeback video before I saw this other clip. Ego is a very multifaceted thing. In certain aspects, it's identity. In certain aspects, it's self-preservation. And ego in and of itself is not inherently bad. When I'm talking about ego here, I'm mainly referring to the lighter concept of it as it relates to social media, influencers, thinking you're better than somebody else for some superficial reason, things like that. My friend East has talked to me about this, and he's mentioned it briefly on one of his live streams. But there are very few things I will find cringe. He's mentioned showing me a video or discussing a topic or something that people could find cringe for various reasons, and just not seeing that kind of reaction on my face or just from me in general. And I guess it happened enough to where he took note of it. I'll use cosplay as an example. I never really interacted that far with members of the cosplay community, not for any reason in particular, but you know, as with any community, you'd hear about unpleasant experiences others would have with certain cosplayers having a big ego and just talking down on others. When I started getting a bit of a following on my Instagram, I started encountering more people who sort of assumed that I'd probably have some kind of ego or think I'm better than others just due to a follower count. And listen, for me, how my brain works, I wear wigs.
Do you wear wigs?
No, I do not.
Have you worn wigs?
No, I have not.
Will you wear wigs?
Maybe.
When will you wear wigs?
I wear wigs. I stand in the corner of my room and I lip sync audios. Why would I get an ego from that? I just think the concept of getting a superiority complex from something like that is so silly. And you see, from there, you can apply it to anything. So let's go to actors and actresses. From my perspective, why would I think you're better than anybody else just because you're really good at playing pretend? We're playing dress up. We're playing pretend. What's happening, guys? That being said, when I mean ego in that sense, I'm only referring to the mentality of now thinking you're better than somebody else because of your cosplaying or your acting. I want you to have pride in your work. You do have to work really hard to be able to act. You can have pride in cosplaying. It took you a long time to put your outfit together, especially if you built the parts, to do your makeup, to edit. I don't want you or anyone to dismiss their efforts. But to me, someone is not better than anyone else just because they have millions of followers, or they can sing a tune, or they look really good.
Okay.
Okay, and that's all the time I have to film for today. Even though I have to stop now, I'm still really happy I got to do at least part of it. Hopefully I finish tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the first time I filmed that when I was younger and I was going through certain things, there was something that was said to me that was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back that led me to attempting to take my own life. So I try to think before I speak. Maybe they had a really bad day. Maybe this is just an environment they're not used to. There can be so many different reasons for why someone is doing something, and it's oftentimes not what you might first assume. And because of that, thus far, in any relationship, I've never been in a shouting match with my partner. Not to say that that might never happen, but I've never really, fought with a partner. Usually we find a way to discuss things calmly and find other ways to communicate. So then, discussing the mindset that one of my previous partners had, this is not all going to be specifically about them, because this is a type of mindset that I've encountered a lot with other people. Oftentimes some of my closest friends have sort of similar mindsets that I'm going to try to articulate. A lot of times when people can grow up in rather chaotic environments, or environments where they really just had to learn to take care of themselves, they can become pretty hyper independent, and they're used to maybe being in a problem, seeing a solution, and going for the solution, just thinking very 1, 2, 3. And in a lot of ways that mindset is admirable. There's many ways that can work to push you forward. It's a good mindset to have. Trying to articulate my mindset that we discussed earlier, I am someone that prefers to try to see all other perspectives before doing that, taking other things into consideration. And so you can see how combining those two mindsets can be really good and really productive and really satisfying for both people involved, because it's oh, you're thinking this way, I'm thinking that way. However, sometimes when people have those kinds of mindsets, they can think very black and white. And depending on what was going on as you were growing up and sort of how you formulate your thoughts, sometimes you have to always learn to prepare for the worst. Always be ready to anticipate something going wrong, and how can I fix it, and how can I mitigate that kind of fallout. And a lot of times people like that may also have gotten very used to just not being able to tell anybody about their problems, not having anyone to go to say what's on their mind, and so you just learn to keep it all to yourself. So when you're in a relationship or you're in a friendship where you're now in a space where that's welcomed, where you can share your thoughts and you can let other people know when you're going through things, it can be a really unfamiliar experience. You're not really sure how to do it. It doesn't come naturally. It's not your first thought. If you're going through something negative, you would want to try to fix the problem before even mentioning it at all. And again, a lot of times this kind of mindset is admirable, and it can get you through a lot of things. But you can see just how I explained it, how it can also have its own detriments as well. As I was beginning this relationship with this person, I did notice there were some instances in which we had discussed it, he would think of something, possible worst case scenario, and his mind would try to get prepared for that. Not just even related to me, just other things. And I understood where that came from. It's not an unfamiliar mindset to me. What was different about this relationship that I hadn't encountered before was, as we went on, I just realized a lot of things that I would have considered like completely non-issues at all. And naturally, I don't want to get into specifics, but things that to me would just have been so normal among anybody, like regardless of gender, regardless of just very normal things that people may struggle with. I realized even those, he sort of felt like he needed to keep inside for the most part. And as some of you may know, I'm someone that has just witnessed a lot. I've had people open up to me about all kinds of things, like former relationships, friends, and now some of you guys here online. I've heard so many stories. I've had people open up to me about intrusive thoughts, war flashbacks, social anxiety, abuse. There's been multiple instances I've been on the phone with people as they were contemplating taking their own lives and working to walk back down from that. I've listened to a lot. This wasn't an incident that specifically happened to him, but the things we were discussing brought up this topic in a larger sense. And if you are someone who thinks this way and you have a partner who thinks the same way and it works for you, then that's great. But for me, the thought of thinking less of a man because he cries, or getting turned off by a man because he's opening up to you about the things he struggles with, I don't understand that at all. But the sucky thing is that does happen. Like other guys can have that experience where they try to open up to their partner and it gets shut down and they're like, well, never gonna do that again. And they just learn to not talk about things. And to me, I hate that, because regardless of gender, everybody is going to go through things. This world is so exhausting to live through. A lot of people have to put on masks just to like function at work, and there's just a lot of things we don't want to do that we have to do. So to me, I feel like your partner should really be your place of solace, the place where you can just let everything go and be your truest self. And if that includes days where you're having a hard time or you're going through things, then of course, like, as your partner, I want to be able to help you with that. Anyway, as time went on, it felt like he had a lot of pressure with various things going on in his life. And I feel like he had this idea of what a relationship would be like and what a girlfriend might possibly say that would be negative or things like that. And because of that, he had his own pressures that were stressing him out. And then he had an added pressure that didn't have to be there about how I would react to certain things. Because as we went on, eventually when he would tell me about certain things that were troubling him, it gave so much more context and it helped us communicate better. But those preparing for the worst case scenarios and things like that, it started happening with us in where he would make a negative assumption about me and what I might think, and he sort of expected reality to match that assumption, and it would come in the form of us talking about something. And this happened multiple times where he would say, see, I knew, and it was a negative assumption about me. And we would talk and he would come to find out, like, no, that's not true. I don't think that. That's basically the opposite of what I believe. And again, it wouldn't happen with just me. Sometimes he would say these things, like have an idea of what my friends might think, and it was just not true. And that's okay, but it got to the point where it was coming at the expense of my character. I felt like I wasn't really being seen for who I am, because it was more so this person who is my girlfriend might think certain things about this or that. And then we got to the topic of opinions. Now, because I'm someone who just genuinely doesn't really cringe at a lot of things, and I can see, like, even if something doesn't appeal to me, it can definitely appeal to other people. I just truly usually don't have a lot of negative opinions about things. I'm either really into something or I'm just like, it's not for me. But as time went on, it felt like whenever I had positive opinions, he kind of didn't really acknowledge them, and he would sort of dig for anything potentially more critical. And this got to a point where if he did share something with me and ask for an opinion, my initial reaction would have been either positive or just kind of neutral. I would pause and I would think, what might other people be critical of in this moment, as a way to look out for him? Because I thought, what if I am hurting this person by not thinking more critically from what other people might say about various things? And I just wanted to communicate in a way where he felt heard, so I would pause and I would think about something that might be negative about this specific thing, and that's what I would say. And honestly, he might have been like perfectly fine with that. He might have taken, because the things that I would say weren't like lies. They were, I guess, valid criticisms, but it's just not something that I would really worry about. However, it's not the way that I would normally want to communicate, which we'll sort of circle back to when I talk about something later on in the video. Anyway, through this relationship, it wasn't very long, but I do feel like we both learned a lot, and I think we were both trying to be as respectful as possible. But coming out of it, it was the first time where I had been in an environment, in a relationship sense, where it felt like someone, more consistently than not, had negative assumptions that they were trying to match to me, and that can put a strain on you psychologically when you're being viewed in that lens. Also, through a few discussions we had, I'm also aware that part of these certain assumptions that he had were loosely related to the fact that I had Awakened Moxie, that I had a bit of a following on Instagram. And I realized it wasn't just him. There were a bunch of people that didn't know me that well, or maybe first time meetings, that had this idea of what an influencer would be like, going back to what I said about the cosplay community and how certain influencers can have an ego. So I was dealing with certain facets of projection where I don't think I'm better than you for any particular reason, but other people would think that I would think I'm better than them, and they would sort of operate in that way. So some of the things would be like, oh yeah, an influencer will definitely cheat, or they'll probably just dismiss me for whatever reason, or they just kind of think that this kind of person will be very vapid and whatnot. And I'm over here just I'm so aware of how silly the things that I do online are. I can't there's just no connection at all between that and how I think. But I understand why they think that, because there are other people who are ruining it for other people in the community who are just having fun because they have these big egos, and it's so silly. Okay, so that was going on at the time, and now I would like to take us back to 2020, where I don't think I've mentioned this online before. Something happened to me. This is all going to be used to explain like what my mental state was like in 2024. So back in 2020, when lockdowns were still like super serious, most places were closed and whatnot, all I could really do is, as far as getting outside was to like go on walks around my neighborhood. And so I would do that pretty often. I would go out for hours sometimes, just to be out and doing something. And then there was one day where I was just walking, as I normally do, in the middle of the day, in a pretty safe area where my neighborhood is. And there was an instance where a man came up behind me while I was walking, and he got in my ear, and he said, "Don't talk, don't scream, turn around and follow me." So in the moment, I turned around and I looked at him, and I instinctively scanned for a weapon. And at the time, I didn't see one. I looked fast, so I might have missed it if he was carrying a weapon, but I didn't see one. And what's more is he was also holding a bike. So in the moment, I didn't know how this person was going to like restrain me. So I just looked at him and I was like, no. And I started walking. So this was in a place where there were like two lanes for cars, and I was over here. There was the other sidewalk over here. And so he said that, I said no, and I started moving to cross the street so I could get away. And he got kind of aggressive, like, what, do you think I'm playing? And again, I was just like, no, and I was like moving. But as I was going, there was a much larger man a little ways down the block, and he was coming at us pretty fast. I don't know for sure if they were working together, but given the situation and the coincidences, I would say like 95% yes. And they might have both tried to do something to me, but at that point, like I had cut across the street and I was going back on my way home. So, like I said, in the moment, and even recounting it, it didn't really feel that scary. I honestly kind of found the guy's attempt kind of pathetic. How are you going to stop me? But afterwards, the effect psychologically, even though I was relatively okay, for the first time when I would go to sleep, I would occasionally be startled awake with nightmares. I can't really remember the nightmares, but it sort of had to do with a situation similar to that. And I also had the realization, like, just because I was able to cut away, if these two people were working with a car, where I was on the side of the street, if they were working with a car and the car door was open, all they had to do was bump me and I would have been gone. Like, it would have been that fast. And again, just because I didn't see a weapon, he might have been holding one. I don't know. I'm aware it did take away a certain sense of security I would have once had. And so after that, I stopped going on walks outside. And this was during 2020, during lockdowns. So back to 2023, after me and this person had broken up, and I had just become aware of more assumptions made about me. There were also other instances where some of my friends were going through pretty rough times of their own. Two of my friends had recently been abused by men. I remember around October or November of 2023, I had just been feeling weird. I've been having headaches. Oh yeah, sorry. Before I continue about the headaches, let me go back to middle school. So around late middle school and early high school, I started getting terrible chronic migraines to the point where I was in and out of various hospitals, getting needles stuck into my head, CT scans. I had a spinal tap done, and for those of you who might not know what that is, skip if you're a little bit squeamish, but essentially it's kind of like they stick a needle into the fluid in your spine and pull it out, I guess so they can analyze it. It hurt. But yeah, I was getting awful migraines, and it was pulling me out of school for weeks. Like, I had to do like homework at home. The reason why I was having all this testing done is because I was having undeniable headaches and migraines, but we couldn't figure out the cause. That's why I was being tested. We don't know why these are happening to me. And now I understand it's heavily related to me having OSDD. From what I've learned, symptoms can kind of fall into three camps. One, you don't really have either of these somatic symptoms I'm going to describe, or you have what I had, terrible migraines, really bad headaches. Sometimes I think they're called like thunderclap headaches. Yeah, just migraines and whatnot. Or people can also get non-epileptic seizures, where it is one of the symptoms of a dissociative disorder, where you can just have a seizure and pass out. But anyway, at the time in middle school, I didn't know what was going on. My folks didn't know what was going on. We were just trying to figure it out. And again, now that I know, part of the reason that they were happening around that time, around middle school and the early part of high school, was because at that point I had come back into contact with an individual who essentially caused a lot of the trauma that we'll get back to. So coming back to October, November of the end of 2023, I started feeling really weird. I was getting headaches again. And I just remember distinctly I had gone to a convention to help my friends with Sombrero Panda. And it felt like for most of it, I don't really know what it was like I was fighting. It didn't really feel like necessarily a switch, but I felt odd and a little bit agitated. I don't think it showed, but I could feel it inside. And I was like bottling it in all the way up until the very end of the convention, and I said goodbye to the people I was helping. And I was starting to walk back to my car, and I felt so weird. And at that point, it just felt like someone else was driving us home. And now I'm aware, like, it was a switch, but it was just very bizarre. Now, the thing was, if some of you have seen one of my earlier videos, I mentioned having about a dissociative episode back in early college. I started heavily dissociating, and this is before I knew what dissociating was. I didn't really know what was happening, but I was just so depressed and dissociated, I ended up completely ghosting everybody I knew. So I slipped into this dissociated depression, and I'm not even realizing how much time is passing. All the days are getting very hazy. I don't really remember like parts of what I was doing, but I ended up just not responding to anybody, and it started going on for so long. I think it was over a year where I wasn't talking to anybody. Apparently there were some times where people like would try to come to my house and knock on my door because they legitimately thought I was dead, just because I basically fell off the face of the earth as far as anybody knew. And honestly, that haze was just kind of like so powerful. I don't even fully remember how I got out of it. I guess mainly just time passed. I'm pretty sure I ended up going to therapy at some point during it. And so just over time, like I started, I guess, coming back into my body. And then when I started getting fully, I guess, cognizant again, I realized like I was just gone for so long. So at the time, after I had gone through that, in learning about various aspects of mental health, when I got to DID and I looked into it, I did obviously see certain aspects of it that I related to, but for me, after I had that dissociative spell, I felt completely normal again. I never really felt super out of body, so I remember learning about DID and making a note of it, like, I had this experience that is quite similar, but I don't have all of these other symptoms described, so I guess I don't have it, okay, and so I just kept going. So back to the end of 2023, when I had that weird experience where I switched in the car and I was just feeling all kinds of warbly in my head, I thought, okay, this is weird, but this has happened to me before and it's passed, and I was completely normal. So I just expected it to pass again. But the thing was, this time it didn't pass, it didn't go away. And now I know, I'm pretty sure part of the reason it was amped up is because it was getting closer to the holidays. And so my folks had a lot of books, movies, pictures out and about that that included the person that I'm pretty sure is responsible for a lot of the trauma. At the time, I didn't know, but I'm sure having that around was making me more dissociated. Now, for these discussions about OSDD and switching and things like that, I'm aware, as I said in my old Instagram post, I know there are people who know exactly what I mean. I know there are systems that have seen me and are watching. I know there are people who have heard of the terms OSDD and DID and have a vague idea of what it is. And I'm also aware there are people who have never heard of it before. And there were people in my comments from the Instagram post who mentioned not knowing what it was, but being like wanting to learn, like wanting to hear what I had to say about it. And if you're someone like that, thank you. Thank you for having that kind of open mind and wanting to understand. Perhaps eventually I will talk more about other various aspects of my experience, but I want to make sure that when I go into it, I want to have the proper language to articulate as best as possible to the people who really have no frame of reference to what systems experience. So for this video, there are certain aspects that I'm going to just cover briefly for the sake of telling all of this other stuff in a relatively cohesive manner. But possibly someday, eventually, if I do decide to go back, I want to unpack it in a way where it's easily understood. So in saying that, after I had that switch and after this weird headache wouldn't go away and just feeling not like myself, I wasn't fully the one in the front, so to speak, and we sat down across from our dad and we just kind of started explaining how we were feeling and not really understanding what was going on, and we started crying. And thankfully our dad was really receptive, really trying to listen to us and try to understand, and he was the one who suggested that I try to speak with a specialist about what I was experiencing. Now again, at the time, I was hesitant because I had had sort of similar experiences before, and they went away, and I was fine for years. So I was like worried about what if I start with a specialist and then everything just goes away again? Like, what am I gonna talk about? I wouldn't really know what to do. But he just said it would probably be good to at least try, and he was the one who ended up finding the specialist that I worked with that has helped me throughout this whole journey. Yes, I'm very fortunate for that. Because yeah, the symptoms didn't go away this time, they stayed. And so what I've learned about with DID and OSDD, a lot of people, I think it's actually more common to start having more overt symptoms like I was doing well into adulthood, rather than when you're growing up. Because some of the people that I had watched online that talked about their experience with DID, a lot of them were more overt systems, like the switches were more overt during their youth, and so they sort of always had an idea. But yeah, what I'm coming to find out is my experience is actually, I think, the more common one, where if you look in hindsight, all of these things that match up, like the migraines, the weird experience I did have in college, things like that, like various other things, now it makes sense under the scope of OSDD. But a lot of the times the symptoms aren't present enough until you reach late adulthood. Then they start becoming more, what I was experiencing, just becoming more heavy, more consistent. The language of the DSM-5 and mental health and therapy and all of those kind of studies are constantly evolving as we're better understanding various aspects of the brain, trauma, and things like that. So where we are now in the understanding, from what I've gathered, is dissociation is a spectrum. So let's say that you are driving to work and then you're driving back home, and then you get back home and you realize you don't remember the drive at all. Like, how did I even get here? How did I stay safe? That's a form of dissociation. So you've experienced dissociation, right? And almost everybody kind of dissociates once or twice in that way. And then if you go up the spectrum, you get depersonalization and derealization, where it sort of feels like you are out of body, or your environment doesn't really feel real. And then continuing on the dissociative spectrum, you get to OSDD. When you get to OSDD, you do have now certain aspects of alters, which is sort of what's the most common thing known about DID, is like having alters and switches. But for OSDD, the alters might not be as distinct, and you might not have as much amnesia as when you go further up into the spectrum with DID. DID is when there is typically more overt switches, more blackout amnesia periods. Yes. Working with the specialist and whatnot, she and I have determined that currently where I am on the spectrum is OSDD. So a lot of people are very familiar with the phrase fight or flight. Like, if you're in a dangerous situation, adrenaline kicks up and you can either fight or flee, like run away. And with trauma, I've also heard the phrase fight, flight, freeze, fawn. For things like dissociation, I've read that it's kind of like the reaction the brain has when fighting or fleeing is not an option. It's how the brain protects you and itself. It tries to dissociate from a dangerous traumatic event. And this specific kind of trauma isn't what's present in all cases of a dissociative disorder, but usually people who have DID or OSDD, just for people who don't know, I'll just be kind of brief about it. I'll just be kind of brief about it for the sake of YouTube guidelines, just in case. But what is something that can potentially happen to a vulnerable child? So, oftentimes for people with a dissociative disorder, there is this traumatic event or events that happened when you're very young, and to keep you safe, your brain dissociates, and it makes it very challenging to actually remember the trauma. And then, as you get older, for whatever reason, you start to remember. And that's why oftentimes things like OSDD and DID do get diagnosed later in adulthood, because that's when what happened with me, like things start becoming more overt. For some reason, you're just starting to remember more things. Okay, so towards the end of 2023, at the start of 2024, I start seeing a specialist, and we start understanding what's going on with me. So at the time, when things were starting, I would have my work and classes Monday through Thursday, and then Thursday I would have my therapy. And the thing is, as we were going into the therapy, we were uncovering more of the repressed trauma. So I would be using my brain power to function Monday through Thursday to get through work and school. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I would want to like reconnect with friends and do other things, but therapy would hit and I would be undeniably more dissociated, as I would have to process what would come out in therapy. So I was just kind of on this cycle of being a functioning person, being dissociated over the weekend, a functioning person, dissociated over the weekend. This was going on for a while. But the thing is, as with any kind of traumatic event, or just anytime you go through something really hard, it undeniably changes you. You are the sum of your experiences. So even though for all these years my brain successfully repressed certain awful things that happened to me, and now it remembers, so now I have to deal with it almost as if it's happening now. And that would change somebody. And I'm usually a very positive, upbeat person. I always try to see the good in things, and I still am, but during that time where I had to process what other alters were feeling, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to switch while I'm talking about it, but like if you were taken advantage of as a child, of course you're going to be angry. Of course there's going to be other emotions that are valid that you have to process. So essentially it got to the point mid 2024 where all the stuff that I had mentioned previously was now compiling together, and it was just really hard to, I couldn't be the positive person that I once was, not in the same way. And I was very thankful to have friends who were reaching out, who some did offer to hang out. I haven't told anybody sort of the extent of what I'm saying here now yet, but during that time where I had to process what was going on, I was undeniably more dissociated. There would be times where people would want to make plans and I would want to agree, but then I just couldn't really function as the person that I normally am, and I just didn't feel coherent. And I didn't want my friends to have to deal with me in an incoherent state. So, and no one should have to deal with inconsistency. So I didn't want to try to make plans and then back out and try to make plans and back out. So I wanted to hold off until I felt pretty decent again. But the thing was, even though I kept trying, the more I had to process and whatnot, and just kind of like the state of the world. You know, inflation, social media is a very strange place now. The internet is a very strange place. People are getting priced out of third places, like a lot of people. going through a lot. So just with my experiences and then certain things that were happening to my friends, overall it just got to a point where I was really trying, but it was very hard to be positive. And this continued until, what month is it? It's November. Today's the last day of November, and I'm gonna have to edit this and try to get it out quickly. But so towards this end of October, right? At that point, I feel like I was running on fumes. I was sort of just in survival mode. I was just doing my studies, doing my work, and then trying to get back to the Moxie that I know I can be, but it was just really hard. But this is where I want to talk about some of the other somatic physical symptoms that I was getting during November. This is just so some people can have an idea of what might happen, some lesser known symptoms apart from like the switches and whatnot. And also I am going to sort of describe the emotional state I was going through, because even if you're not dealing with dissociation like I am, I know there are other factors like trauma, anxiety, other kinds of things that can overlap and be very similar to my experience during this last month. So after doing work with the specialist, overall I was less switchy than I was at this point last year, right? However, now that I wasn't experiencing as much stuff with the alters, I was experiencing other physical symptoms. There would be times where I could plan out my week on my planner and get a lot of stuff done and feel productive and feel like the Moxie I typically feel like. But then I started having more instances where I would do the same thing, plan out my day like down to the hour. And then for some reason, I would just be swamped with fatigue and stuck in bed. And I didn't understand why. Because I was eating well, I was getting enough sleep, I was doing exercise, I was taking care of my body. And so this fatigue and this being frozen did not make sense to me. And I'm someone who takes self-motivation very seriously. I'm aware no one can actually solve your problems besides you. I understand the importance of discipline. I understand the importance of gratitude. I also practice manifestation. Like, I know the importance of doing things to improve your life. And when I am fully functional Moxie, not dealing with all of the dissociation, I can do that. But I was just having these weird days where I was just physically frozen, and I would be in bed for 1 to 3 hours, very confused. I'm like, you have to get up. You have to do these things. But my body just wouldn't move. And there would be times where I would try to force myself out of bed, and then my vision would blur, like I couldn't see. And now I understand this is another symptom of dissociation, but at the time I didn't know what was going on. And I was getting very angry at myself because I know if I do A, B, and C, I will be happier. I will enjoy life more. I need to do these things, but physically I just wasn't able to, and I didn't understand what was going on. I would just get to the point where I'd be so fed up with myself. And then I had one day in late October, early November, where I was paralyzed in bed, and I just forced myself to get up, forced myself to sit down in a chair, open my laptop. At the time, all I wanted to do was type out talking points for this video. That's all I had to do. I had cleared out my schedule, just do this for today. But I couldn't move. My vision was blurring, and I couldn't do the task. And this had happened a couple times where like I was almost crying because I'm like, I need to do these things so I can have some fulfillment in my life, but I can't, and I'm gonna be frozen like this for a couple of hours, and the opportunity will pass, and I have to go back to studying and doing my work. And for me, I was able to do really well at my job and do well with my studies. So this was making me even angrier because I have proof that I can function. So why can't I do this? Why am I stuck here? And so on that day where I was trying to type and I couldn't see, I ended up opening up an email with my therapist, and I sort of typed out and explained what was going on. I said, essentially, I feel kind of switchy while I'm typing this. I'm frozen, and I don't want to lose any more time like this. I don't want to be stuck like this. I didn't know what was happening. So I went back in for another appointment with her, and I came to understand like what I was experiencing is a form of dissociation. It could be due to a myriad of things. It could be an alter is having a flashback, but it's not at the forefront of my mind, but regardless, my body is frozen because it's remembering some kind of trauma. And I believe that state is kind of similar to states other people can experience if they have complex PTSD or PTSD, sort of similar to functional freeze in people with ADHD and things like that. When people are going through difficult times, I'm very well aware that respite can be found anywhere. It can be in a song, it can be in a hug, it can be through a streamer, it can be through a snack. What works for someone in the moment will be specific to them and to their situation. Sometimes it is a deep heart-to-heart with someone. Other times it's something completely absurd. I've heard people talk about how D&D channels have saved them. I've heard people talk about how Markiplier has saved them. And I know both aspects, serious discussions like the one we're having, and the absolute silliness that is most of my OC content. I know both can help people in different ways because I've seen the heartfelt DMs that I've received. I was gonna have a portion in this video talking about just the weird state of social media these days, but I feel like this video is already getting kind of long and I'm running out of steam for today. Essentially everybody knows, right? It's almost impossible to scroll without seeing something that's just really agitating. There's a lot of negatively charged energy just constantly on social media. Even if you try to avoid it, there are ways to like go to places that are less like that. But just the way the algorithms are set up now, it's everywhere all the time. So I haven't been on TikTok or Twitter/X for a while, and it's helped. It's helped just like not being on there. But yeah, so essentially just I had been going through what I was going through for the end of 2023, most of 2024. And while I had processed a good amount of the alter stuff during October, that's when more of the other kinds of dissociation happened, which I guess would make sense because if the alters are more of a separated consciousness of what happened during trauma and now I'm more aware of it, my body would react more because it's like my body is now also processing the trauma. But anyway, like I said, during October, I was kind of running on survival mode, getting the bare basics done and then freezing whenever I wanted to do anything else. And yeah, I didn't know how long it was gonna last. And then I believe it was in the middle of November, DPR Ian started an Instagram live stream. And if you haven't heard me mention him before, he is an artist that also happens to have bipolar and DID. I really admire all his work, and now looking back, it is a touch humorous that I was so drawn to the art, not knowing I had OSDD, and now knowing I have OSDD. But anyway, but in this live, he just was talking about a lot of various things that he has been going through, a lot of things that he has overcome. And while it's true you can't know for sure what someone's character is like unless you've spent a significant amount of time with them, from the content that I've seen and all the things that he's shared, he really seems to keep trying to lead with a genuine, authentic energy despite all of the bullshit that he's gone through. And for me, in that moment, watching that live, I felt like that was my moment of respite. It felt like if he can do it, I can do it. And so for the longest time, me just trying to get my spark back, me doing the things that used to work and they just weren't working, me trying new things and just weren't really working. It's just been a long time, and then I felt like watching that live was when things started to click for me again. So I'm pretty sure it was either the same day or the next day where I reactivated my Awaken Moxie account. And I was just twice as determined to get back to the Moxie that I know I can be. And so I reactivated the account, and I told myself the next day I was just going to go to a cafe to do my studying. I forgot to mention before, my work and my classes are both online, so I just been spending a lot of time in the house. A lot of time in the house. I could still go out to like do basic things, like if I needed to go shopping or if I needed to go to a therapy appointment. But other than that, I've been in the house for a long time. I didn't necessarily develop agoraphobia. Making the decision to go to the cafe to study, I knew for various reasons that you can surmise that we've discussed already, it was going to trigger dissociation. So just to sort of explain what I've been fighting through, even fighting through to just record this video, I wrote down in a planner that I wanted to wake up around 7 so I could leave to go to the cafe at 8 and study. And then when I woke up that morning and I'd had that plan to go to the cafe, again, my body was frozen in bed with fatigue and dissociation. And I was stuck like that for 2 or 3 hours, very angry, but I was still determined. Like, I didn't care if the timeline shifted, I'm still gonna go to the cafe and study. I was stuck like that for a while, and I did switch to an alter who managed to get us up, and we talked to my dad a little bit about what we were going through, why we were trying to go to the cafe, and eventually I switched back and we were able to go. I was gonna start at 8, but I didn't get there until 12, but I was like, it's fine, because I did it. So I was there, I studied, it was fine. And then I told myself, Sunday, the next day, I wanted to film a comeback video. I wanted to talk about things while I was sort of like fresh in my head, kind of clicking back into being a person again. But again, the dissociation happened, and while I had the whole day set aside to film, all I managed to do on that day was get the plants in my room and set up, and I wasn't able to film. And prior to that, a couple weeks prior, I would have been, again, really angry with myself. It would have felt like a self-betrayal to like discipline and all these other things. But I had come to understand that this dissociation and what I'm fighting through, it is a physical thing. It's not something I can 100% just like brute force motivate my way out of. And that's what I was trying to do. That is what I was doing, and it was still like weighing me down. And like I said, before that day, like a couple weeks ago, I would have been really angry at myself. But on that day, even though all I was able to do was set up the plants, I felt happy because I was overcoming the paralyzing dissociation, even if it was just really, really slow. And so every day I just did a little bit more to be a person again, till eventually you saw me. It was another day where I was able to actually sit down in front and start filming, and that's when you saw me in the white shirt. And even though I didn't get through it, that's why on that day I said, like, I'm still happy I got to do it, because normally I would have been really angry at myself. I was like, it's okay. you're still doing it. And right now I'm still obviously not at 100%, but I'm getting better, and I will continue to get better. I know the Moxie I want to be. I know the Moxie I'm capable of being, and I am fighting every day to get to that point. And I'm starting to win. There were many things discussed in DPR Ian's live. I'll just include this one snippet. And like I mentioned before when I was wearing white, my discussion of ego and his discussion of ego are two separate things. What he mentions about speaking when you're healed sort of ties back into the first point that I made about trying to think before I speak.
Am I somebody to myself? I feel like, this is me personally too, by the way, this is me personally, don't get it twisted. I personally believe I can't take everything personally, meaning I can't assume that I'm a somebody to myself. The minute I do that, I let my ego take over me. I have a big ego. I know what could happen if I let that ego take over me. I can't. Because if that happens, I can never forgive the people that did me dirty. I can never forgive my fight that I had with whoever, family, friends. I can never let that go. I'm spiteful. I become so spiteful. And when you become spiteful, you speak in the devil's tongue. Don't do that. Don't do that. Heal. Heal first. Heal first and then open your mouth. Because, trust me, speak from the heart when it's healed. Don't speak from the tongue when you're not healed. It does more damage than you can possibly imagine. Not just to them, to you. I am nobody. And therefore, I can truly, truly give. I can truly, truly learn. I can truly, truly love and I could truly, truly be somebody to everybody. If I'm a somebody to me, I can't be somebody to somebody else. Does that make sense? If I'm a somebody to myself, I can never be a somebody to you. Because it will be just about me, 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 me. And you have time and you have energy to always give back to yourself when no one's around. Love yourself. Respect yourself. And this is just my saying. This is just my way of concluding my idea and my heart and where my stance is with myself.
So after watching that, I also kind of considered what's something that I can give too. And as I've mentioned before, I've had the privilege of many people opening up about many different things in my DMs. For people that don't know, I've said before that I typically don't respond to DMs just for the safety of both parties involved. It's better to not usually engage when it's in a private setting like that. But despite not responding, I do read the messages that I get. And since starting Awaken Moxie, I've had the privilege of many people opening up about so many different things, various topics, both good and bad. And that's how I know that the silliness of my OCs can also help, because there have been people that have mentioned during times when they've been struggling, seeing the antics that the OCs are doing can help make their day a little bit better, and I'm really glad that they could do that. In response to some of my more serious videos, basically all on YouTube, I've had people open up about things like PTSD, schizoaffective disorder, social anxiety, Tourette's, all kinds of different things. Along with that, while I was away and just dealing with being dissociated for so long, there really were just so many lovely people who, I don't know, because a lot of people on social media experience just people dehumanizing them. Yeah, I hear all kinds of horror stories, and that's why I've been so thankful, because for the most part, like real big majority, people in my comments and in my DMs have been really kind, really cool, and almost never like make things weird. And so a lot of people were just, while I was gone, they just wished me well. They just were hoping I was okay. And I was sort of surprised that some people even went out of their way to email me while I was on this, I guess, hiatus. Overall, all the energy I got was just people hoping that I was okay, wishing me well, completely fine if I had made the decision to leave content creation, and they were just hoping I was living life happily and doing something fun and creative. Messages like that. There were some people who even went and back to my Ko-Fi, I think, and donated while I was gone. Thank you for that. That's very kind. Just thank you so much for that energy. It really means a lot, and it meant a lot while I was going through what I was going through. So tying both of those trains of thought together, I was kind of considering what's something that I can give. I'm aware now on Instagram there's a limit. You can only send one DM and a person has to accept the invite before you can send any more. And I know a lot of people who have opened up to me about certain things needed typically a couple more than one message to say everything they wanted to say. So I decided, why don't I make the Awakened Garden? Essentially, it was just going to be a place similar to what my inbox could have been like, for people to share whatever it is they wanted to share. If there's something about the videos that I posted that you relate to and you just wanted to talk about it, you could do it there. Again, it would be the same thing, in where I would not respond directly there, but I would accept the invites as long as people don't make it weird. And usually they don't. But there I would accept the invite on that page. And yeah, you can open up about all kinds of things. Because for me, I was just, like I said, I was running on fumes. I was in survival mode. And I think what I needed personally is just seeing someone just be genuine and talk about things, and that's what helped me come back to being a person. So I know how that can help. That's also why I wanted to do this video, because I've received a comment before, it might have been a DM, where someone said sometimes talking is all that anybody really needs. And this also circles back to what I was discussing in the beginning of the video, because I know there are a lot of times where people don't really have a space where they feel they can really be vulnerable and really just say what's actually on their mind, actually say certain things that are troubling them, or even say things that they're proud of. Because sometimes the people around you, they don't actually want you to do well or succeed, and that can be so disheartening and isolating. So in the garden, you can sort of say, you could say things that are troubling you. You can also say things that you want to do, things you're excited for. You can plant a little seed of intention, like maybe, I want to learn how to play tennis, or I want to become a streamer. I know sometimes when people have these things that they want to do and they have these ideas, and they might tell their friends, and their friends might shut it down, and it can, yeah, like I said, it can be really discouraging. So you can say it there. You can say it in the garden, and you can come back and water it with little updates like, today I set up my camera. Today I started my first stream. Things like that. I know sometimes people have so much they want to say, and they get to a point where they just don't know how to verbalize it. So even if you're just like, you come to the garden and your message is, I don't know what to say, that's fine. You don't have to know. That's okay. And maybe you're just exhausted. You're so exhausted. You can take a nap amongst the flowers. They're soft, they're comfy. If you want to share memes, because sometimes people would share memes with me, you can do that. The flowers will take the memes. Sometimes you would share your thoughts with me, like whatever you want to say. Moxie, I'm afraid of the future. Moxie, I don't know who I am because I've been so busy being what other people need me to be. Or if you just need a place to cry, any kind of thoughts you have like that, troubling thoughts, hopes, wishes, it's safe in the garden. Now, again, mostly everybody has been pretty cool, but just in case, common sense, but it's not a place to go to be like, Moxie, I'm about to unalive. Get help elsewhere. And it's not a place to try and date Moxie. Like I said, even before, when sometimes people wanted to say nice things, you've been pretty cool about it. It hasn't really been like a weird kind of a thing. So you can say nice things if you'd like. I won't be able to check the account all the time, but when I am, and if the messages are okay, then I will accept them. I guess to round out the news now for what's going to happen going forward, I do still have a couple of OC videos that I filmed, I guess it was in 2023 at this point. What is time? And I forgot I finished editing them, so I think I'll upload the last few that I have, and then moving forward, I don't know how many people saw, I had already started having an interest in learning how to make music, learning how to do 3D art and things like that. So occasionally during this past time, I have been studying that more, and there have been a few people who are familiar with different aspects of that have been curious about my progress. I guess for 3D art, like I did the donut. These are my donuts, if you'd like to have some donuts. I'm trying to learn VFX for that, mainly. It's very hard. It's very time consuming, but I'm learning. And then as far as music goes, I think the last time you heard me talk, it was when I was really interested in making funk and trap. And I still have an interest in that. But the more that I've learned, the more that I wanted to express different things that required more knowledge. So it started off with me just wanting to learn beats, but then I wanted to learn how to add other instruments and whatnot. But the thing is, I don't know how to play any instruments. I don't know music theory. I don't know chords. Like, let's say certain people may have like a symphony in their head, but when they try to translate it, before they have the skills, all they can do is push note C. That's all you got. C, E, G. So I'm still learning, but now I know going into 2025, now that I'm feeling a little more coherent, I can focus more on that again, and I can learn more. And I also got a keyboard. So this will help me learn the notes a little bit better, I'd like to hope. So what I'm trying to say is I'm going to sort of wrap up with just a few more OC videos, and then going into 2025, I do just want to continue learning about other aspects of art. So if you followed me exclusively for the OC content, I understand if you head out, and thank you so much for spending time with me and all of the OCs. Oh, by the way, I mentioned this in a comment before, but just to clarify, oddly enough, even though I do have OSDD, none of the OCs are alters. They really were just OCs for me that I created and I played as. And also that was ironically part of what helped me understand that I really do have alters, because I know what it's like to be Moxie and have an idea and play as a character. The alters are different. It's a different thing. But yeah, I'll occasionally get questions of people asking, can I make fan art of the OCs? I've had someone ask if they could use my OC as a D&D NPC. That would be great. Like, if you want to take my OCs and put them in situations, put them in events, put them in D&D campaigns, that'd be so fun. Do that, yeah. Let them live adventures. But anyway, in doing so and going into 2025, this was going to tie into the part about social media that I didn't really talk about. I just feel like social media has gotten really weird. A lot of people are feeling it. A lot of people are just not using certain websites, not using certain apps anymore because it's just, I don't know. So I know in coming back and not uploading as frequently with the OC content, that's sort of the opposite of what you're supposed to do if you're trying to grow on social media. But people who have seen my earlier videos know that the reason I started Awaken Moxie was just to find a way to bring happiness into my life. I was never thinking about growing an account. I was never posting with the intention of gaining followers. I was just posting things that I thought were silly and that brought me joy. And I was really thankful for whenever anybody also found joy in what I was doing. So now that's what I'm going to be doing into 2025. I just won't be able to upload as often because trying to make 3D art and music takes a long time. So it'll probably be just like random updates of things that I'm learning. There's a part of me that does want to try to go back into streaming, but we'll see just how recombobulated I get going into 2025, how much free time I'll have in between work and whatnot. I'm sure there's much more I wanted to express, but I think those were all of the main points. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your just sincere support as a person, like not as a creator, not as anything other than a person who's just existing, trying things, trying to make life for myself as happy as possible. Thank you. I hope you're doing well. You can leave a comment about whatever you want down here, or you can go and leave it in the garden. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.